Imagine your entire world is about to be erased by an enemy you never even knew existed. And worse, what if the rest of the galaxy just stood by and decided to let it happen? That was the nightmare we woke up to on an otherwise perfectly normal Tuesday. High above our atmosphere, a fleet of warships from the Valoran Dominion, the undisputed bullies of the cosmos, was getting ready to wipe us out. Their leader, a tyrant named Lord Vexiron, stared down at our beautiful blue planet and sneered. "Just look at this pathetic little rock," he said to his first officer, "crawling with the most primitive forms of life." You are not going to believe how this ultimate story of betrayal turns into the greatest comeback in history, so you'll definitely want to stick around to see how it ends. "This shouldn't take more than a couple of days, my lord," his second-in-command, Krath, answered smoothly. "The Council did send them the standard warning. We never heard back." Vexiron let out a cold, sharp laugh that echoed across the bridge. "Maybe they're too terrified to answer," he considered. "Or maybe they're just too dumb to know what's coming. It doesn't matter either way. Start the invasion. Take our flagship straight to their biggest city. It's time we teach these creatures what real power looks like." But light years away from Earth, at a station called Nexus Prime, the so-called Galactic Council was in session. This group, made up of dozens of alien species, was supposed to be the guardian of peace. The reality? It was a chamber full of politicians looking out for themselves. The council was headed by High Arbiter Sana, an ancient being made of living, shimmering crystal. She had watched empires rise and fall for thousands of years. To her, Earth was just another footnote in a history book. "The Valoran Dominion is beginning its pacification of the human homeworld," she announced, her voice sounding like shifting glass. "As per our treaty, they will bring the humans under proper galactic rule." But one ambassador, a tentacled creature named Clith Varen, shifted uncomfortably. "High Arbiter," he interrupted, "with all due respect, the humans haven't bothered anyone. They've done nothing to deserve this." "They exist in a sector the Dominion has claimed," Sana replied, her tone becoming ice cold. "Our laws say that's all the reason they need. Besides, they're just a level 2 civilization. They've barely managed to land a few robotic probes on their own moon. They're a threat to absolutely no one, and frankly, they will probably be better off under the Dominion's management." "But what if they try to fight back?" Clith Varen pressed. Sana's crystal body pulsed with a cold, annoyed light. "Then they will learn the cost of defiance, just like every other primitive species that came before them." Not another person in the Grand Hall said a word. A few quietly agreed with her, but most were just too scared of the Dominion to defend a planet they couldn't even point to on a star map. And just like that, as the rest of the galaxy looked away, the final countdown for our world began. The main Valoran ship cut through Earth's atmosphere at precisely 11:47 a.m. Eastern Time. It was a horrifying sight, nearly a mile long and shaped like a giant sharpened claw. Its hull was made of a dark, non-reflective metal covered in weapons, and its shields could brush off anything the known galaxy could muster. It moved with a slow, deliberate arrogance as it lowered itself over New York City. The Valorans weren't just attacking. They were making a statement. They wanted us to see them. They wanted us to feel completely helpless. And it was working. Millions of people froze right where they stood, their faces tilted up in shocked silence. They watched this impossible shadow block out the sun, felt the deep vibrating hum in their chests, and smelled the strange metallic odor of alien tech burning through our air. But fear wasn't the only thing spreading that day. Deep inside the Pentagon, top generals were crowded around screens, staring at the alien ship in total disbelief. The President of the United States was on a secure video link, his face pale, but his voice steady. "Tell me what we've got," he ordered. "That can even put a scratch on that thing." General Morrison, a woman with steel-gray hair and a stare that could break stone, just shook her head. "Sir, our entire military was designed to fight other people. Our most powerful missiles would bounce off its shields like spitballs." Then, a quiet voice spoke up from the back of the war room. "So maybe we should hit it with something that wasn't built to be a weapon, suggested a young lieutenant named Chen, whose job until this morning was just managing satellite communications, something they would never expect. What are you talking about, Lieutenant? Chen pulled a file up on the main screen. 3 months ago, we launched a new satellite. It's an orbital mining platform with industrial-strength lasers meant to break up asteroids for mineral collection. The power it puts out is insane, but it's never been tried in a fight. General Morrison looked doubtful. Can we even aim that thing at a moving ship from orbit? I don't know, ma'am, Chen admitted, but I think I know the one person who can. Hundreds of miles away, in a tiny San Francisco apartment, a brilliant engineer named Dr. Sarah Park was watching the news, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was the person who had written the satellite's targeting software. At that moment, her phone buzzed. A serious, official voice on the other end told her that the future of the human race was in her hands. She didn't even pause. "Tell me what you need," she said. What followed was the most frantic 36 hours in human history. As that Valoran monster hung over New York like a death sentence, thousands of scientists, engineers, and soldiers worked around the clock, fueled by adrenaline and terrible coffee, to turn a mining tool into a planet-saving weapon. The challenges were huge. The laser wasn't built for precision aiming, the guidance system was incredibly slow, and the power core could only hold a full blast for a few seconds. But we humans have a secret weapon the Valorans knew nothing about. We are ridiculously stubborn when we're cornered. We just don't know when to give up. Dr. Park rewrote the entire targeting code in 12 hours straight, typing so fast her fingers went numb. Lieutenant Chen became the command center, linking the satellite to military networks all over the world. A teenage gamer in Tokyo figured out how to boost the power supply using a trick for high-end gaming computers. A retired Mercedes engineer in Stuttgart solved a major overheating issue with a design he drew on a napkin. This wasn't some polished professional army. This was a messy, exhausted, but brilliant collection of regular people from all over the planet, doing the impossible because they had no other choice. Aboard the Valoran flagship, the crew reported that the humans weren't fighting back at all. No missiles were flying, no fighter jets were scrambled. "It seems the primitives are accepting their fate," an officer noted. "Just as I said they would," Lord Vexiron gloated. "They know they are powerless against us." "Get ready to broadcast our demands," he ordered. "Give their leaders 1 hour to surrender without conditions, or we will begin wiping their cities off the face of their planet." But Lord Vexiron was completely and utterly wrong. We weren't surrendering. We were aiming. At exactly 1:23 p.m. on Thursday, a full 48 hours after the invasion started, Dr. Sarah Park took a shaky breath and pressed the enter key. 300 miles above the Earth, a satellite designed for breaking rocks turned its lens and shot its laser at the alien warship. The beam itself was invisible, but the effect was anything but. The Valoran shields, designed to block energy blasts and physical objects, had no defense for this specific frequency of super-concentrated, heated light. The laser sliced through the shield like it wasn't even there. On the warship's bridge, alarms screamed and officers yelled in confusion. Lord Vexiron stared in absolute shock as a glowing red spot appeared on the ceiling of his command center and started to melt. Then another spot appeared, and a third. "What is happening?" he bellowed. "What are they shooting us with?" "It's a weapon type we've never seen, my lord," an officer shrieked. "The shields are having zero effect." "That's impossible!" Vexiron screamed. But it was entirely possible. It was just something they never bothered to consider. And that was only the beginning. The laser beam, guided by Dr. Park's frantic typing, punched through the ship and hit its main power core. The explosion that followed was so bright it lit up the afternoon sky like a second sun. That massive ship, the pride of the Valoran fleet, fell out of the sky like a wounded bird. It crashed into the Atlantic Ocean about 30 miles from the coast, kicking up a giant wave that, miraculously, didn't cause any major damage. For a few long seconds, the whole planet seemed to hold its breath. And then, in every city, In every home, a worldwide cheer went up. Back on Nexus Prime, the news of the flagship's destruction landed on the Galactic Council like a bomb. High Arbiter Sana called for an emergency meeting, her crystal body flickering with alarm. "Someone explain this to me right now," she demanded of her assistants. "How did a primitive race destroy a Dominion dreadnought?" A small reptilian assistant pulled up the sensor readings. "It seems, High Arbiter, they weaponized a piece of their mining equipment. The frequency on that human laser, it's not in any of our military databases. Our shield technology was completely useless against it." "And how long did this adjustment of theirs take?" Sana demanded, her voice tight with disbelief. "About 36 of their planetary hours, High Arbiter." The words just hung there in the silence. For the first time in her 1,000-year life, Sana was speechless. She had never, ever seen a species adapt so quickly in the face of total annihilation. It took her own people centuries to perfect their shield grids. The humans had found a way to bypass them in less than 2 days. "This changes nothing," she finally said, but that iron certainty she was known for had vanished. One lucky shot doesn't win a war. The full might of the Dominion fleet will still grind them into dust. But Ambassador Clith Varren wasn't so sure. He'd spent years studying humanity, fascinated by these chaotic, unpredictable creatures from the galactic fringe. He'd lost himself in their culture, their art, and their science. And in all that time, he'd learned one thing the High Arbiter and the entire Dominion had completely missed. You never really know how clever or how dangerous a human can be until you've backed them into a corner. Meanwhile, on Earth, a woman named Admiral Chen stood before the United Nations. She was a small woman with short gray hair, but her eyes were sharp enough to cut steel. Just a few weeks ago, she was looking at brochures for retirement communities. Now, she had to figure out how to save the world. "We won the first battle," she stated, her voice perfectly calm and steady. "But this war is just getting started. The Dominion has hundreds more warships just like that one. We only took down a single scout. Now, they're going to be angry, and they won't make the same mistake twice. We can't count on that same trick working again." "So what's our move then?" the Chinese representative asked, his voice strained with worry. "We do what our species has always been best at," she answered. "We adapt, we innovate, and we refuse to go down without a fight." A map of the world lit up the screen behind her. As of this moment, every single factory on this planet is now a weapons factory. Every engineer is a weapons engineer. Every scientist is working on a way to fight back. We don't have the luxury of time to build a proper military, so we're going to have to get creative and build an improper one. "That's not a plan," the Russian representative argued. "That's pure desperation." "Yes," Admiral Chen agreed, her eyes like chips of flint. "It is. But desperation is something humans understand very well, and it's an emotion our enemy knows nothing about." She looked out at the faces of the world's leaders and saw a mix of fear, hope, and sheer raw determination staring back. "The Valorants think they know us. They see us as weak, primitive, an easy target. They are about to get a very rude awakening." Thousands of miles above them, in the dead silence of space, Lord Vexeron gazed at the mangled wreckage of his warship and felt something he hadn't felt in centuries: doubt. The humans had surprised him. That was not supposed to happen. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, prepare for a full-scale planetary assault. No more second chances, no more mercy. Burn their cities from orbit, shred their satellites, wipe them from existence." His officers responded with a bloodthirsty cheer. They were desperate to avenge their fallen comrades. They didn't feel that flicker of doubt their commander was now wrestling with. To them, victory was still guaranteed. They had no clue how wrong they were. For the next 7 days, the Valorant fleet pounded Earth with everything it had. They turned cities into seas of plasma, flattened military installations, and swept the skies clean of satellites. They took millions of innocent lives and scarred the face of the planet for generations to come. But they did not conquer Earth. They didn't even come close. Because every time the Valorants thought they had the humans figured out, the humans completely changed the game. Every time they developed a defense for a human weapon, the humans came up with something brand new. Every time they obliterated a human base, another one would pop up in the most unexpected place. The humans fought back with modified deep earth mining drills and turned commercial jumbo jets into makeshift bombers. They unleashed devastating computer viruses and hijacked the Valorant's own communication channels. They laid brilliant traps, staged brutal ambushes, and even flew suicide missions. They fought with weapons no Valorant could have ever conceived of, because no Valorant had ever faced the kind of total extinction that fuels such desperate creativity. A farmer in Brazil jury-rigged his crop-dusting drone to drop explosives on a Valorant troop transport. A group of teenage hackers in a basement in Ukraine broke into the Valorant comms network and broadcast fake orders, tricking two capital ships into firing on each other. A physics student in India figured out how to disrupt Valorant teleporters using spare parts she scavenged from a bombed-out hospital. By themselves, none of these small wins was a game changer. But when you added them all up day after day, they began to do real damage. The Valorants would lose a ship here, a transport there, and a whole squad of soldiers somewhere else entirely. Their invasion began to grind to a halt. Their confidence started to crack. Their doubt began to grow. On the seventh day, Lord Vexeron received a report that sent a chill down his spine. He had begun this invasion with 50 capital ships. He was now down to 39. 11 ships, just gone. Lost to a species that couldn't even travel between the planets in its own solar system. 11 ships, defeated by creatures the Council had dismissed as primitives. 11 ships, destroyed by a people who should have been begging for surrender on the very first day. Lord Vexeron stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring down at Earth. The planet just kept spinning, a defiant marble of blue and green. Its people were still fighting, still dying, and still refusing to quit. For the first time in his long and decorated career, he started to wonder if he had made a terrible, terrible mistake. And in homes and shelters and hidden bunkers all across the globe, humanity looked up at the sky and made one single, unified promise. They would not break. They would not surrender. They would fight until they had won, or until there was no one left to continue the fight. Because that's what humans do. It's what they have always done, and it's what they will always do. No matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how impossible the odds, the galaxy had made a catastrophic error in judgment by underestimating Earth. And now, it was about to learn the true cost of that mistake. The war had only just begun. 3 weeks had passed since the invasion began, and Earth was still standing. That fact alone sent shockwaves through anyone in the galaxy who was paying attention. The Valorant Dominion had steamrolled dozens of planets before, and none of them had lasted more than a few days. Earth was supposed to be a footnote in their history books, a conquest that took a few hours. Instead, it had become this annoying, persistent problem that simply refused to go away. On the Galactic Council station at Nexus Prime, the delegates gathered for yet another emergency session. It was becoming a daily ritual. What had started as a simple mission to pacify a primitive world had spiraled into a full-blown crisis. High Arbiter. Solana sat at the head of the massive circular table, her crystalline form looking a little less bright than usual. She hadn't had a proper regeneration cycle in days. This whole mess with Earth was giving her headaches she never thought possible. "The latest intelligence from the Valorant fleet," she announced, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "They have lost another 11 ships in the last week. Their ground forces are completely unable to establish any permanent bases on the planet. The invasion is—" She paused, trying to find the right word. "Stalled," Ambassador Keithforn offered. His tentacles slowly coiled and uncoiled as he thought. "The invasion has stalled, and everyone in this chamber knows it." Counselor Threshnack of the Hegemony shifted his huge armored body. His people were renowned for their military brilliance, and he'd been studying the reports from Earth with a keen professional eye. "I have been analyzing the humans' tactics," he rumbled. "They are unlike anything I have ever seen. They follow no known rules of engagement. They have no discernible chain of command. They don't even use the same weapons from one battle to the next." That just sounds like pure chaos, another counselor sneered. That should make them easy to defeat. No, Threshneck corrected him. That's what I believed at first as well. I was wrong. Their chaos is not a weakness. It is their single greatest strength. Our strategies are effective because they are built on logic and predictability. We calculate our enemy's most likely moves and prepare our counters. But you can't predict these humans. Every single fight is completely different. Every human seems to be fighting with their own tactics, their own gear, and their own crazy plans. How is that even possible? Solana asked. How can any military function with no unified command structure? I don't know, but it's working. The Valorans can't adapt fast enough. By the time they figure out how to counter one human strategy, the humans have already moved on to 5 completely different ones. Ambassador Keverin then pulled up a live feed of Earth on the main screen. On the bridge of the alien flagship, the war map was a horror show. The red icons of the Valorant invaders were being drowned in an ocean of blue dots representing human resistance. They were being swamped on a planet they thought they'd conquered in a week. We have a much bigger problem, the commander said, his voice tight. The humans are adapting to our tech at a speed that is, frankly, terrifying. In the first week, they got their hands on a single damaged fighter. A few days later, they had it in pieces, figured out how it worked. A week after that, they were building their own. That's ridiculous, Counselor Solana snapped. It takes generations to reverse engineer technology that advanced. And yet, the commander shot back, they're doing it. Look. He flicked the screen to a new image showing a human aircraft. It was a monstrosity, a Frankenstein's monster of human and Valorant parts that looked like it should just fall apart in mid-air. We took this shot 3 days ago over what they call Europe. It's one of their jets, but it's flying with one of our engines and firing our own weapons. Our intel says they cobbled it together in less than 2 weeks. A heavy silence crushed the air in the council chamber. Every single one of them was thinking the same terrifying thought, but nobody dared to say it out loud. If these primitive humans could figure out their ships this fast, what would happen if they ever got their hands on something truly important? Miles below, on a shattered Earth, the war for survival was in full swing. In a hidden bunker buried deep beneath the Swiss Alps, Admiral Chen was the nerve center for the entire planet's defense. She was running on nothing but black coffee and sheer willpower, barely sleeping more than 4 hours a night since the aliens first tore through the sky. The command center was a chaotic symphony of noise around her, with officers and technicians glued to their monitors, tracking alien fleets and guiding human forces. Update from the Asian front, an officer yelled above the din. The Valorans are pulling back from Shanghai. They're saying the city's too hot to handle. Good. What's the news from South America? The admiral fired back instantly. It's a trade, ma'am. We lost Buenos Aires, but it cost them 2 more landing ships to take it. They're paying for every single inch of ground with their own blood, the officer reported. Admiral Chen gave a grim, satisfied nod. That was her entire strategy in a nutshell. Make every single win so agonizingly expensive for the invaders that it felt like a loss. Humanity didn't have the fancy tech to meet them head-on, but they could bleed the all-powerful Dominion, 1 ship, 1 soldier at a time until they finally broke and went home. The only problem was whether humanity would be wiped out before that day came. Earth was bleeding out too. Entire cities were now just fields of rubble. Millions were dead. Every last resource was stretched to its breaking point. They couldn't fight this kind of grinding war forever. Admiral, another voice sliced through the noise. Priority 1 message coming in from the Seoul Research Division. They say they've had a breakthrough. What kind of breakthrough? She demanded, her voice sharp with hope and exhaustion. They're claiming they can disrupt Valorant shields, using a modified cell phone signal. If this is real, our soldiers could knock out their shields with gear they can carry in a backpack. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Admiral Chen felt a tiny flicker of a smile. This was the one thing the galaxy never understood about humans. They weren't the strongest species out there. As it turned out, humanity's secret weapon wasn't some super genius or brute strength. It was the wild, frantic creativity that you only find when your back is against the wall, something the invaders could never have seen coming. And that fire was first sparked by a 19-year-old college kid named Kim Ji-young. She was just a telecommunications major when the sky literally cracked open and her world ended. Hiding in a damp basement as Valoran bombs turned her city to dust, she noticed something weird. Every time she tried to get a signal on her phone, a piece of alien junk nearby would flicker and die for a second. Anyone else would have written it off. But Ji-young started messing with it, right there in the dark, with just her phone and a desperate need to see the sunrise one more time. While the world above burned, she found that if you layered certain cellular frequencies in just the right way, it created a ripple of static that the Valorans' invincible shields simply couldn't block. It wasn't a miracle weapon. The effect was weak. It only lasted for a few seconds, and you had to be practically on top of the enemy. But it was a tiny crack in their perfect armor, and a crack was all humanity needed. Tell Sol to blast their research to every lab we have left on this planet, Admiral Chen ordered, her voice now like flint. I want that tech in the hands of every soldier we have by the end of the week. Yes, Admiral. At the same time, halfway around the world in a quiet town in rural Kansas, a totally different kind of miracle was happening. Before the invasion, Marcus Williams was just a mechanic. For 20 years, he'd spent his days fixing cars, trucks, and tractors, solving real-world puzzles with a wrench in his hand and grease under his fingernails. So when the aliens showed up, he did the only thing he knew how to do. He looked at the problem parked in front of him and started figuring out how to fix it. The problem was a downed Valoran shuttle. A lucky shot from a human jet had sent it spiraling into a cornfield. The alien crew had bailed, but the ship itself was mostly in one piece. Before the Valoran cleanup crew could get there, Marcus and his neighbors dragged the whole thing into a barn and threw a tarp over it. For the next 2 weeks, Marcus took it apart, piece by alien piece, just to see what made it tick. He didn't have a fancy engineering degree or a high-tech lab. All he had were his favorite wrenches, a crowbar, and the stubborn belief that any machine could be understood if you just stared at it long enough. See this gizmo here? He asked his helper, a former high school science teacher named Ellen. I'm pretty sure it's their version of a fuel injector. Just look at how these lines run to the main engine. Ellen squinted at a strange box covered in symbols that looked like a plate of spaghetti. How on earth can you tell what that thing does? You just follow the plumbing, Marcus said with a shrug. Fuel goes in here, some sort of magic happens in the box, and power comes out this side to the engine. Honestly, it's not much different from a carburetor on a '67 Chevy, just a whole lot shinier. Marcus, this is advanced alien technology, she whispered, completely amazed. It's supposed to be beyond our understanding. Marcus just grunted. Everything's beyond us until it ain't. Now hand me that socket wrench. All over the planet, little scenes just like this were playing out. Farmers, welders, school teachers, and teenagers were cracking open alien gear with whatever tools they had. Most of it was a dead end. But every so often, somebody got lucky. And each little breakthrough was another piece of the giant puzzle humanity was racing to solve. The Valorans were completely lost. To them, technology was a sacred science, perfected over millennia by the galaxy's greatest minds. The idea that a bunch of grease monkeys and amateurs could reverse engineer their most advanced equipment with basic hand tools and gut instinct was impossible. Lord Vexerin stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the latest casualty reports. He had never lost this many ships in a single military operation, and he'd never fought an enemy that was so infuriatingly unpredictable. My lord, his tactical officer interrupted, his voice trembling slightly. The humans have rolled out a new weapon in Europe. It appears to be temporarily disabling our personal shields. How is that possible? Our shields are flawless. We don't know, my lord. Our engineers analyzed the devices. They're a chaotic mess of primitive human electronics. They shouldn't even power on. Lord Vexerin smashed his fist onto the arm of his command chair. These creatures have barely learned how to leave their own moon. How are they inventing counters to technology they shouldn't even be able to comprehend? His officer just stood there, frozen in silence. He had no answer. Back on the Valoran homeworld, an ambassador named Keth Varen was having a very different kind of chat with his brilliant young aide. Her name was Thelvora. "I've been digging into human history," Thelvora said, "trying to understand their mindset. I think the Dominion missed something incredibly important in our threat assessment." "And what might that be?" "Humans have a chaotic approach to conflict. Most species fight with logic, using proven strategies. Humans seem to treat warfare like some kind of wild art project. They are constantly inventing bizarre new weapons and tactics for the sole purpose of surprising their enemy. Their entire history is just one long story of the little guy outsmarting the big guy." "We are aware of their tendencies," Keth Varen said, waving a dismissive hand. "It is why they were classified as a potential annoyance, despite their primitive nature." "You're right," Thelvora said, leaning forward. "But it's so much worse than that. It's a detail I don't think the High Council ever truly understood." She keyed up a file on the screen between them. "When a species like humanity is backed into a corner on the very edge of being wiped out, their ingenuity doesn't just grow, it explodes. They become reckless, desperate, and 10 times more dangerous than before. They start trying things that no logical civilized race would ever dream of. They take these insane, suicidal risks, and every now and then, one of those impossible gambles actually works." Ambassador Keth Varen was quiet for a long time. "Are you telling me," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "that in trying to conquer their world, we've accidentally forged our own perfect enemy?" Thelvora's voice dropped, deadly serious. "I'm saying we walked up to a hornet's nest and kicked it as hard as we could. Now we're shocked that we're getting stung. The High Council is in for a rude awakening when they realize we started a war with a species that specializes in pulling off the impossible. I'm telling you, this isn't a done deal anymore," Thelvora warned, her tone grim. "If we stay on this path, I honestly don't know if we can win." And that theory was about to face its ultimate test. Thousands of light years away on Earth, the 4th week of the invasion began with a massive Valoran assault on the Human Research Headquarters in Geneva. This wasn't just some random city. It was the brain of the entire global resistance, and the Dominion was determined to burn it to the ground. Admiral Chenwei knew they were on their way. She had been getting ready for this moment. But there's a huge gap between preparing for a battle and surviving it, and she knew one thing for sure: this victory was going to cost them. "All units, hold your ground," she ordered through the encrypted comms. "Let them land. Let them think we're terrified, and then we're going to show them what true fear really feels like." The Valoran invasion force consisted of 300 soldiers, complete with armored walkers and air support. On paper, it was an overwhelming force, more than enough to obliterate any human defense. At least, that's what their commander thought. They touched down just outside the city limits and started their advance. The streets were silent, almost unnervingly so. Every building was dark and seemed deserted, as if the entire city had just been evacuated. A tight knot of anxiety formed in the gut of the Valoran commander, a battle-hardened veteran named Jax Vorn. He'd been in this game for decades, and he knew that quiet streets like this meant one thing: they were walking into a trap. He ordered his troops to push forward, but to be extremely careful. The first explosion blew a manhole cover into the sky, vaporizing 5 of his soldiers in an instant. The second detonated from a 3rd-floor apartment, shredding an armored walker with a hailstorm of metal. The third attack came from every direction at once, as 100 hidden fighters opened up from rooftops, sewer drains, and blown-out storefronts. Let's be real, the Valorans had starships and laser rifles, but we had something they never counted on: home field advantage. And we were going to defend our home until our last breath. Construction workers fired up chainsaws, college students lobbed homemade explosives, and accountants in torn suits charged aliens in high-tech armor with nothing but sharpened pipes. It was a chaotic, bloody mess. But against all odds, we were actually winning. The alien commander, Jax Vorn, was screaming into his radio for air support, but our newly built makeshift jammers were sending his fighter craft spiraling from the sky. He begged for reinforcements, but we had already choked the highways with mountains of rubble. By the time he finally tried to order a retreat, it was way too late. We had them boxed in. In just 2 hours, the entire Valorant attack force was completely wiped out. Not a single alien soldier made it out alive. As the smoke started to settle, Admiral Chenwei walked through the ruined streets of Geneva. Her fighters, covered in grime and blood, emerged from their hiding spots, completely spent but still breathing. They had lost too many, and a lot of the wounded wouldn't make it through the night, but they had held their ground. "This was only one fight," she said, her voice trembling with exhaustion but filled with resolve. "We have to do this again tomorrow and the day after that. We keep fighting until they're broken or until we're all gone. Are you still with me?" A wave of determined nods was her only answer. They were in this until the very end. Back on the Valorant homeworld, the news of this staggering defeat sent a tidal wave of panic through the government. The Valorant war ambassador was shouting about honor and demanding an immediate brutal retaliation, while the council leader was desperately trying to keep things from falling apart. But in the middle of all that chaos, one ambassador, Keth Varen, just sat there in stunned silence. He was replaying the words of a wise colleague he knew. These humans weren't just surviving, they were adapting. They were learning. In every single battle, they were reverse engineering Valorant technology. With every single day that passed, they were developing new, completely unpredictable strategies. They were becoming more and more dangerous. A chilling thought started to take shape in his mind. What happens when these humans stop just defending their planet and decide to come after ours? He had no idea, but he knew one thing for certain. If that day ever came, the galaxy would never be the same. The war was a long way from being over. Against impossible odds, humanity was still in the fight, and as long as they were in the fight, they had a shot. That's all they had ever wanted. A shot. And they were about to take it. 6 weeks into the invasion, something happened that sent a ripple of absolute terror through the Valorant Empire. A refueling depot near the Kepler travel corridor suddenly went completely silent. At first, the aliens assumed it was just a technical glitch, but then a remote mining outpost went dark. And after that, a deep space military checkpoint failed to report in. Lord Vexerin got the news on the bridge of his flagship, which was still parked in orbit above Earth. His face, already lined with weeks of stress, went completely pale. "Are you actually trying to tell me?" he asked, his voice a barely audible hiss. "Wait, are you telling me that the humans are somehow attacking our bases in deep space?" The commander's intelligence officer gave a shaky nod, his hands trembling. "That's what it looks like, my lord. We've lost all communication with 3 separate facilities in the last 48 hours. The very last message from the Kepler station reported unidentified vessels right before they went silent." "That is impossible. The humans don't have starships. 6 weeks ago, they could barely get a satellite into orbit." The officer gulped. "Well, my lord, it appears they have them now." Lord Vexerin sank into his command chair, a cold, sickening dread spreading through him. For the first time, he wasn't worried about failing to conquer Earth. He was terrified of what these relentless little creatures could become if he didn't exterminate them right now. The incredible story of how humanity went from fighting for their lives to bringing the war to the stars had started just 3 weeks before in a fiery spectacle over the Pacific Ocean. A Valorant cruiser, the Stellar Flame, had been hit hard by human missile batteries. It wasn't destroyed, but its systems were fried, and it was falling out of the sky. In a last-ditch effort to keep his ship's advanced tech away from the enemy, the alien captain tried to sink it in the deepest part of the ocean. But the self-destruct system malfunctioned, and the cruiser crash-landed, mostly in one piece, right next to a small island in the Philippines. In a matter of hours, the island was surrounded by human naval ships. The most brilliant scientists and engineers from 12 different countries were flown in immediately. For the next 2 weeks, while the battle for their world raged on, This team worked 24/7 to unlock the secrets of the alien ship. The whole project was headed by Dr. Elena Vasquez, a brilliant propulsion engineer who had dreamed of traveling to the stars since she was a little girl. Never in her wildest dreams did she imagine she'd one day be standing on the bridge of a captured alien starship. She was looking at technology that was centuries more advanced than anything humans had ever conceived of. "This isn't magic," she said to her team on the first day. "It just feels like it because we don't get the science behind it yet. It still has to follow the rules of physics. Our job is to figure out what those rules are." It was a massive challenge. The alien computers were built on a form of logic that was completely foreign to them. The engines worked on principles that seemed to defy everything they thought they knew about physics. The navigation system was built for a species that could perceive dimensions humans couldn't even fathom. But slowly, piece by a painstaking piece, Dr. Vasquez and her crew began to crack the code. They discovered that the faster-than-light drive didn't actually move faster than light. Instead, it literally folded space-time around the vessel, creating a shortcut through the very fabric of the cosmos. It was an idea human physicists had only ever dreamed about on paper, but here it was, a fully functional engine. The weapons were actually pretty simple. They were basically cannons that turned raw matter into super-focused beams of energy. The shields were just extremely dense bubbles of manipulated space. The targeting computers could lock onto a ship from millions of miles away. It was all completely mind-bending, but it wasn't impossible for them to understand. "We can fly it," Dr. Vasquez's weary voice crackled over the secure channel. After 2 solid weeks of working around the clock, she sounded like she was running on fumes. "The cockpit's built for something with way more arms than us, but we can rig it. Just get me 1 more week, and I'll have her ready to kiss the sky." Miles deep beneath the Swiss Alps, Admiral Cheney stared at the message on her datapad. For a long moment, the words just blurred. "They did it. They actually did it," she whispered, a slow, tired smile finally breaking through. Her voice hardened. "Get me a secure line to the United Nations. It's time we had a talk." That talk turned into a 6-hour brawl. Leaders from every nation left on Earth screamed and argued over what to do with their impossible prize. Some wanted to park it in orbit, a last-ditch planetary shield. Others wanted to tear it apart bolt by bolt, hoping to copy the tech and build their own fleet. A few even argued for using it as a bargaining chip to beg for peace. Finally, Admiral Cheney cut through the noise with a plan so simple it was terrifying. "Hiding isn't winning," she told the Silent Council. "We could hold them off for 100 years and still lose who we are. Every single day this war goes on, more of us die, and another city turns to ash. We have to end this, and there's only one way. We are taking this war to them." A shocked silence filled the virtual chamber. Everyone knew exactly what she was saying. For the first time in human history, she was proposing that they stop defending and start attacking. "You want to send our people into the heart of their empire," the Chinese representative said, his voice tight with disbelief. "In 1 stolen ship we can barely operate? That's not a mission, it's a suicide run." "It might be," Admiral Cheney countered, her eyes like flint. "But sitting here while they burn our world to the ground is also suicide, just a slower version. This way, at least we have a fighting chance. This way, they bleed too." There was no arguing with that. The vote was unanimous. Humanity was about to punch back. Captain Maria Santos was, without a doubt, the greatest pilot Earth had ever seen. She'd fought on 3 different continents and had more confirmed kills than anyone in history. She was a living legend. So when they asked her to command humanity's first and only starship, she didn't hesitate for a second. "I'll need a crew," she said to Admiral Cheney, her voice all business. "And not just soldiers. I need people who know this is a one-way ticket and are at peace with it. People who hate those things as much as I do." "You can have anyone who volunteers," the Admiral replied. "The line to sign up is already a mile long." "I don't want the eager ones," Santos shot back. "I want the best. I want the innovators who can build a miracle out of duct tape and a prayer. I don't give a damn about their records. I care about what they can do when everything has gone to hell." The team she assembled was the strangest military unit ever formed. She had her pilots and Navy grunts, sure, but she also brought on a world-renowned mechanic, a hacker who was basically a digital ghost, a pro race car driver with a feel for engines, and a physics professor who hadn't left his campus until the day the aliens arrived. Imagine aliens shatter your world. They grind your cities into dust. They take everything from you. What do you do? For 200 survivors from 20 different countries, speaking a dozen different languages, the answer was simple: get even. They had their captured enemy ship, which they'd renamed the Defiance. It took another week of frantic work to get it battle-ready, packing it with every weapon they could scavenge and wrestling with the bizarre alien controls. And during that week, they got a surprise bonus. They salvaged 2 more battered Valorant ships from old battlefields. They were junk, but with a little human ingenuity, they sputtered back to life. So now they had 3 ships, with 200 crew on each. That's 600 people against an empire of 100 worlds. The odds weren't just long, they were impossible. But humanity was never good at listening to the odds. On the day of the launch, Captain Santos stood on the bridge of the Defiance. Her voice piped to every corner of the small fleet. "I'm not going to give you some big motivational speech," she said, her voice rock solid. "You all know why you're here. You know what was taken from us. Those things kicked in our front door and tried to wipe us out of existence. They thought we'd just roll over and die. They thought we were weak." She let that hang in the air, looking at the faces on her screens. They were scared. You could see it, but their eyes were burning with a fire that was anything but weak. "Well, it's time to show them just how wrong they were. We're going to take the very ship they built, and we're going to use it to tear their whole empire down. We're going to make them regret the day they ever heard the word Earth. And if this is a one-way trip, then we go down swinging, and we make them pay for every single life they stole from us." A roar erupted from the crews. It wasn't a clean, disciplined cheer. It was a raw, primal scream of pure fury and desperate hope. "All right, people, to your stations," Santos commanded. "We have a war to win." The 3 ships launched from secret bases across the globe, blasting through the atmosphere into the cold black void. They assembled high above the planet, a tiny, defiant fleet facing the massive Valorant armada that still loomed in orbit. The alien commander, Lord Vexerin, saw them pop up on his sensors. He could have erased them from the sky with a single thought. His fleet outnumbered them at least 10 to 1, but he hesitated. Maybe it was a strange flash of curiosity. Maybe it was a sliver of respect for a species that simply refused to give up. Or maybe, just maybe, it was a cold flicker of fear that these tiny creatures were just crazy enough to be a problem. Whatever the reason, he let them go. And that single moment of hesitation would cost him everything. The Defiance and its newly christened sister ships, the Vengeance and the Fury, jumped to faster-than-light speed and vanished. Their first target was a Valorant supply depot at the Kepler Transit Point, the main interstellar gas station for their entire invasion force. The base was defended, but not heavily. The Valorans never dreamed anyone could hit them this deep in their own territory. No one had ever gotten this far. Captain Santos dropped the Defiance out of hyperspace right on top of the station, so close the defenders never even saw it coming. A combination of captured alien energy cannons and good old-fashioned human missiles tore through the station's shields like they were made of paper. "Light them up," Santos said, her voice calm, "and make damn sure no one sends a distress call." The entire fight lasted 12 minutes. The station was turned into a silent, expanding fireball, along with the 3 patrol ships that scrambled to help. The Defiance had a few new scorch marks, but she was hungry for more. "That one was for New York," Santos whispered, watching the wreckage burn. For the next 2 weeks, the 3 human ships became phantoms, striking supply lines, communication relays, and military outposts across Valorant space. For decades, humanity had been the galaxy's punching bag, but not anymore. They were careful. They never hit civilian targets, only military ones. But they were systematically taking apart the Dominion's war machine. More than that, they were sending a message. Earth was done being the victim. Earth was on the attack. So what would you do if your home was invaded by an enemy you couldn't possibly beat? Would you surrender, or would you fight back with everything you have? On the capital world of Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council watched reports of the human counteroffensive with stunned disbelief. "They've taken our ships," the Valorant ambassador shrieked in an emergency session. "They are using our own technology against us. This is an outrage. The Council must intervene." The High Arbiter, Sana, looked bone-tired. "And what would you have us do? Send our fleets? Ignite an even larger war?" "Yes," he screeched. "Exterminate them. Scorch their pathetic little world before this contagion spreads." That's when Ambassador Keth Voron rose to speak. His tentacles were perfectly still, and his voice was quiet, yet it silenced the entire chaotic chamber. "I must object," he said simply. "The humans have not attacked any member of this council. They have not harmed a single soul who is not wearing a uniform. They are fighting for their survival against an unprovoked invasion of their home. If we attack them now, we become no better than the invaders." The Valorant ambassador scoffed. "They are a menace to galactic peace." "No," Keth Voron corrected him smoothly. "They are a menace to the Valorant Dominion. Let us not confuse the two." He turned to the entire assembly. "We all made a grave error when we allowed this invasion to proceed. We labeled the humans primitive and effectively gave the Dominion our blessing to conquer them. We were wrong, utterly and completely wrong." "They're not primitive," he argued, his voice cutting through the tension. "They're just different. And today, we're all paying the price for our own arrogance." "So what are you suggesting?" Arbiter Solana demanded. "I'm suggesting we rethink everything. The humans don't want to conquer the galaxy. They just want to be left alone. Maybe it's time we finally grant them that wish." The chamber erupted into chaos. Some delegates yelled their support for Keth Voron, while others shrieked that the humans had to be exterminated. The debate raged for hours, going absolutely nowhere. And while the politicians argued, the crew of the starship Defiance was prepping for the boldest mission in human history. Captain Santos stared at the star charts on her main view screen, her eyes locked on a world she'd only ever heard mentioned in terrified whispers on intercepted enemy comms. It was the Valorant homeworld itself, Nexar Prime, the very heart of the Dominion, the seat of all their power. "We don't have the firepower for an invasion," she told her senior officers. "We can't win a straight fight, but we can hurt them. We can show them that they aren't safe, not even in their own backyard. We can finally make them understand this war won't end with us surrendering." "That's a one-way trip, Captain," her first officer said, his voice completely flat. He was a former Russian submarine commander, Yuri Vulov, a man who had spent his entire life training for a war that had finally arrived. "The odds of us coming back from this are next to zero." "Probably," Santos agreed without a flicker of doubt. "But if we pull this off, if we actually strike their homeworld, it changes the entire game. They will never, ever see us as weak again." "What would you do if your entire world was being pushed to the edge of annihilation by an enemy who saw you as nothing more than a bug to be squashed? Would you just lie down and accept your fate? Or would you fight back with every last ounce of strength you had? If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because you're about to hear the incredible story of how a handful of heroes did exactly that. "They will never underestimate us again," Captain Santos said, looking at the faces of her crew, her family, the 200 souls who had journeyed with her into the darkest part of the galaxy. "Are you with me?" The roar that answered her was immediate and overwhelming. Of course, they were with her. They'd been with her since day one, and they would see this through to the very end, no matter what it was. The Defiance changed its course, setting its sights on the heart of the Empire, Nexar Prime. Far, far away on a scarred and broken Earth, people held on to a tiny shred of hope. The counterattack was finally underway, and the galaxy was about to be changed forever. The planet of Nexar Prime had never known the scars of war. For 12,000 years, the Valorant Dominion had always fought its battles on someone else's planet, light years away from their perfect, untouched home. The Valorants genuinely believed their homeworld was an unbreakable fortress, a flawless jewel box floating in space. Down on the surface, they lived in glittering cities that touched the clouds, surrounded by art and music so beautiful it could make a grown man weep. They had built this perfect society on the backs of conquered worlds, and they went to sleep every night completely convinced they were safe, protected by the most powerful military the galaxy had ever known. They were completely and totally wrong. Their long, peaceful slumber was about to be brutally interrupted. The Defiance tore out of hyperspace at the system's edge, a ghost popping into existence just beyond the reach of their most sophisticated sensors. On the bridge, Captain Santos gazed at the distant star that gave life to a corrupt and arrogant empire. "Tell me how bad it is, Park," she said, her voice a low rumble on the quiet bridge. Her tactical officer, a brilliant young woman from Seoul named Lieutenant Park, was completely absorbed by her console. "Captain, this entire system is locked down tighter than a vault. I'm counting no less than 50 capital ships in high orbit, and that's not even counting the weaponized platforms and satellite grids. On the planet's surface, every single major city is protected by a planetary shield." "And what about our main targets?" Santos asked, her eyes never leaving the view screen. "Fleet Command is dug into the northern continent. The primary shipyards are in orbit around the far side, and their biggest weapons lab is buried miles underground, right below the capital. Each one is a fortress within the larger fortress." A small, grim smile touched Captain Santos's lips. This was exactly what she had anticipated. The Valorans were thorough, but they were also incredibly predictable. They had built their defenses to repel a massive fleet using conventional, by-the-book tactics. It had never, in a million years, occurred to them that they might have to stop a small band of desperate, unpredictable humans with absolutely nothing left to lose. "Signal the Vengeance and the Fury," she ordered. "Tell them to move into position. We make our move in 6 hours." The plan was beautiful in its simplicity and terrifying in its audacity. The 3 human ships would hit 3 different high-value targets at the exact same time, forcing the Valoran fleet to divide its attention and its power. The Defiance would make a straight run at Fleet Command. The Vengeance would target the orbital shipyards. And the Fury had the most insane job of all: jump in hot, make a ton of noise, and draw as much enemy fire as it possibly could. It was a plan that depended on perfect timing, an unbelievable amount of bravery, and a whole lot of luck. Captain Santos looked at the star chart, a deep feeling in her gut telling her that not all of her ships, and maybe not even her own, were going to make it home from this. This was a one-way ticket for some of them, a final, desperate gamble that could either save humanity or see them all erased from the universe. But if it succeeded, it would flip the entire war on its head. For 6 long, agonizing hours, the crews on all 3 ships ran their final system checks, their hands gliding over weapons and shield controls one last time. They recorded messages for the families they'd left behind on Earth, whispering goodbyes to loved ones an entire galaxy away. Some met the approaching storm with a quiet calm, while others struggled to keep their hands from trembling. But every single one of them knew that in just a few hours, their names would go down in history, either as heroes or as footnotes. Then, right on schedule, the trap was sprung. The Fury burst out of hyperspace, materializing right in the center of the enemy's main defensive fleet and immediately opening fire on the nearest warship. The idea wasn't to destroy it, but to cause a massive distraction, and it worked perfectly. "We have their attention," Lieutenant Park's voice crackled over the comms on the Defiance. "About 30 ships are peeling off to chase the Fury. They're thinning out their planetary defenses." "That's our cue," Captain Santos said, her voice as steady as granite. "Full throttle to Nexar Prime. Let's give them a day they will never forget." The Defiance launched toward the planet like a cannonball. Alarms shrieked across the Valoran defense network as they finally realized what was happening. The remaining warships scrambled to intercept, but it was too late. They were caught completely flat-footed by the sheer suicidal audacity of the attack. On the bridge, First Officer Vulov watched the tactical map, a flicker of cold, professional admiration in his eyes. They never imagined anyone would be insane enough to hit their homeworld directly, he murmured. Their whole defense grid is designed for a fleet versus fleet engagement, not a single ship on a kamikaze run. And that's precisely why it's going to work, Santos replied. All weapons, fire at will, target fleet command. The Defiance's cannons, a Frankenstein's monster of stolen valor and technology and pure human ingenuity, roared to life. Beams of raw energy and clouds of missiles hammered the military headquarters that spanned the northern continent. The planetary shields flared, holding firm against the first volley, and the second, and the third. But these shields were built to stop conventional weapons. Dr. Park's new shield-disrupting technology, perfected over weeks of bloody trial and error, was anything but conventional. "The shield matrix is failing!" Lieutenant Park's voice cut through the chaos. "Their defenses are down!" Captain Santos shot back. "Then hit them again! Unleash everything we have!" The fourth barrage of plasma fire tore through the compromised shields as if they were made of paper. Colossal explosions ripped across the Fleet Command campus, disintegrating buildings and vaporizing infrastructure that had stood for 1,000 years. A deadly chain reaction ignited as munitions depots cooked off, sending titanic fireballs rolling across the compound. Far below, on the planet's surface, Valoran citizens stared at their sky in absolute horrified shock. This couldn't be happening. The enemy shouldn't be here. Their home was supposed to be invincible. In the capital, Supreme Commander Thraxerin watched the damage reports flood his screen, a cold dread seeping into his very soul. He was the most powerful military officer in the entire Dominion, the sworn guardian of the homeworld, and he was failing in the most spectacular way imaginable. "How did a single ship get past our entire defensive grid?" he roared at his trembling staff. "How did they just bypass everything?" His tactical advisor stammered, "Sir, their tactics make no sense. They're chaotic, reckless. They're taking chances no sane commander would ever consider." "They're not taking chances. They're suicidal," Thraxerin screamed. The advisor paused for a heartbeat. "Perhaps, sir, but they're also winning." On the other side of the planet, the warship Vengeance was systematically dismantling the orbital shipyards. These massive space stations were the very heart of the Dominion's military power, where their legendary warships were born. Captain James Okonkwo, a man who had once been a naval officer for Nigeria and had dreamed of a moment like this his entire life, stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, his posture radiating pride. It wasn't the pristine, glorious command he'd once imagined, but the dream felt very, very real. "Concentrate all firepower on the primary construction bays," he ordered, his voice echoing with authority. "If we can gut their manufacturing capabilities, they won't be building any new fleets for at least a decade." The Vengeance's cannons turned the shipyards into a cosmic skeet shoot. Half-built dreadnoughts detonated in their cradles. Entire swarms of construction drones vanished in silent puffs of light. The massive support struts groaned, then buckled, collapsing inward and blasting a blizzard of deadly shrapnel across the orbit. "We're seeing multiple secondary explosions, Captain," his weapons officer reported with a grin. "The entire shipyard is coming apart." "Excellent," Okonkwo replied, a grim smile finally touching his face. "Just excellent. Now let's get the hell out of here before their reinforcements arrive." The Vengeance banked sharply, leaving the fiery tomb of the enemy's industrial might behind as it streaked toward the safety of deep space. A handful of surviving defense ships gave chase, but they were like angry wasps, too far and too slow to catch the human ship before it vanished into the void of hyperspace. The Fury, however, was out of time. Captain David Chen had known this was a suicide mission from the start. He'd accepted it because his life and the lives of his crew was the price for everyone else to succeed. Now, his ship was cornered, being hammered by a dozen enemy cruisers. The shields were gone, the engines were dead, and his crew, they were gone too. "Captain," his comms officer whispered, her face streaked with blood. "The Defiance and the Vengeance. They made it out. They're clear." A faint, weary smile crossed Chen's face. He could feel his own life fading from the shrapnel lodged in his chest, but it didn't matter now. He had done his duty. He had bought them the time they needed. "Good," he breathed. "That's all that matters." He tried to issue one last command. "All hands, brace for..." But the words died in his throat. The Fury's core went critical, and the battleship dissolved in a silent, brilliant flash of light. Aboard the Defiance, speeding away from the blast, Captain Santos saw the light flare up on her view screen. She squeezed her eyes shut for one agonizing second, picturing the 200 souls who had just given their lives so that hers could escape. "The Fury is gone," Lieutenant Park said, her voice thick with grief. "I know. Plot a course for the rendezvous point. We need to meet the Vengeance and get our people home." "Captain, did we do it? Was it worth it?" Santos opened her eyes and looked at the tactical map. Behind them, the enemy capital, Nexar Prime, was in chaos. Their central command was a smoking crater. Their orbital shipyards were a mangled graveyard of steel. Their legendary defense fleet was shattered and confused, desperately trying to comprehend how their worst nightmare had just become a reality. "Oh yes," she said, her voice a low, grim rumble of satisfaction. "We did it. We hurt them. We hurt them badly." Down on the surface of Nexar Prime, the news struck the Galactic Council like a physical shockwave. "The humans. They have attacked Nexar Prime," High Arbiter Sana stammered, her crystalline body flickering with disbelief. "They struck the Valoran homeworld. This is unprecedented. This is a declaration of total war." The Valoran ambassador shot to his feet, his face a twisted mask of fury and panic. "They must be annihilated. The Council must authorize full mobilization to erase their species from the galaxy." "And on what grounds would we do that?" Ambassador Kethvan's voice was unnervingly calm, cutting straight through the hysteria. "The humans targeted military installations, Ambassador. Their strikes were surgical. They actively avoided civilian population centers. By any sane measure, they are merely retaliating for your invasion of their home. They are a plague on every civilized race in this galaxy." "No," Kethvan corrected him gently. "They are a threat to the Valoran Empire. There is a significant difference." He rose slowly, his eyes scanning the faces of the other stunned council members. "For months, I have studied these humans. I have watched this war, and I have come to a conclusion I suspect many of you will find distasteful." "What conclusion?" Sana asked. "They are not going to lose. They will never stop. They will adapt, they will innovate, and they will invent new and terrifying ways to fight anyone who threatens their existence. If this council commits to a war of extermination, I assure you, they will find a way to make every one of our worlds bleed. And even if we conquer their planet, we will spend the next 1,000 years fighting an insurgency that will never, ever surrender." "So what is your proposal?" "I propose we end this madness now," Kethvan declared. "I propose we admit that sanctioning this invasion was a catastrophic error and take immediate steps to rectify it. I propose we offer humanity peace." The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates were screaming, some supporting Kethvan's radical idea, others demanding the humans be crushed before they could become an even greater threat. The debate raged for hours, tearing the council and the very alliances that held the galaxy together apart. Imagine being told your entire world, everything you've ever known, now belongs to someone else. That's what happened to us. An alien armada called the Valorans appeared in our skies, and their leader, Lord Vexarin, gave us a simple choice: surrender or be erased. They expected us to crumble. But they didn't know us, did they? If you want to hear how a bunch of underdogs with cobbled-together ships and a galactic empire running, you need to stick around for this story. Because while Vexarin was sitting on his flagship, completely cut off from his home world and watching his invasion fall apart, he finally realized his mistake. His supply lines were gone, his promised reinforcements were cosmic dust, and he was stranded. He glared at his staff, their faces hollowed out by weeks of failure. "What are my options?" he snarled. One officer mumbled, "We still have 30 ships, my lord. We could level their cities." Vexarin scoffed. "For what? To die slower? No one is coming for us. We've already lost." Another officer nervously suggested, "Perhaps we could negotiate? A withdrawal for our captured soldiers?" A third one just laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Negotiate? After we killed millions of their people and burned their cities, why would they ever trust a word we say? Lord Vexarin slumped into his command chair, a feeling he'd never known washing over him, pure, cold dread. He was the conqueror, the one who never lost. Now, he was the one cornered and afraid. The words felt like poison in his mouth, but he forced them out. "Contact the human leadership," he choked. "Tell them we want to discuss terms." That desperate signal, a white flag sent across the stars, eventually found its way to Admiral Chen Wei, deep in a command bunker beneath the Earth's scarred surface. She read the message once, then twice, then a third time, just to make sure her weary eyes weren't playing tricks on her. "They want to surrender?" her aide whispered, his voice shaking with disbelief. "They want to negotiate," Chen Wei corrected him gently. "That's not the same thing." She stood in silence for a long moment, her mind racing through the possibilities. "But it's a beginning. Tell them we will meet. We will hear what they have to say, but make it absolutely clear that the only item on the agenda is their complete and unconditional withdrawal from our solar system. Nothing less. If they refuse, the war continues." She had shown them that humanity could strike back anywhere, even at the very heart of their supposedly untouchable empire. They finally understood that this war would not be the easy conquest they had planned. They knew that even if they won, the cost would be beyond devastating. A cold smile touched her lips. "They're scared," she said softly. "Good. They should be. It was supposed to be a 7-day war. That's what the galaxy thought anyway. But on Nexar Prime, Supreme Commander Thex Aaron stood in the smoldering crater that used to be his headquarters and knew the galaxy was dead wrong. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Valoran homeworld had been hit. Their legendary invincibility, gone. Poof. And somewhere in the black void of space, 3 little human ships, battered and bruised, were limping home as heroes. They'd done the impossible. They took the fight to the big guys, and now nobody would ever forget it. All of this just 6 months after the invasion started. What began as a simple conquest had spiraled into something way bigger and a whole lot messier. Back on Earth, life was slowly crawling back. The fallen were buried, the wounded were mending, and everyone else was trying to glue their shattered lives back together. It would take generations to truly heal. But humanity had survived. No, they did more than survive. They won. The Valoran invaders were gone. After weeks of tense back and forth, Lord Vexarin finally caved, agreeing to pull every last soldier off the planet. In exchange, Earth sent back the prisoners of war and some of the less important alien tech they'd captured. It was a lousy deal for the Valorans, but hey, they had 0 cards left to play. Their empire was a total mess. The homeworld was in chaos, and their grip on the galaxy was starting to slip. In a rebuilt command center in Geneva, Admiral Chen Wei watched the final Valoran ship punch a hole in the sky. It vanished into the clouds, taking the last trace of the invasion with it. "It's over," her aide whispered. "The war is," Chen Wei corrected her. "But the changes, they're just getting started. We're not the same people we were half a year ago. We know we're not alone now, and we know there are things out there that see us as nothing more than ants. And now," she said, her voice turning to pure iron, "they know we bite back." "So what's next?" her aide asked. "We rebuild, we get stronger, and we make damn sure no one ever shows up on our doorstep uninvited again." Meanwhile, on Nexar Prime, the Galactic Council was freaking out. The raid on the Valoran homeworld had sent a panic through the entire galaxy. For ages, the big empires figured their home systems were untouchable fortresses. The humans just proved them all wrong. If a species that could barely get around its own solar system could humble the mighty Valoran dominion, then nobody was safe. Some planets started dumping all their money into defense. Others got real curious, real fast. All across the galaxy, scholars started studying humanity, trying to crack the code of how these so-called primitives pulled off a miracle. But for some, for a quiet few, it lit a spark of hope. On 100 different worlds that had been steamrolled by the great powers, people had always just accepted their fate. They thought fighting back was impossible. But now they had proof it wasn't. In the shadows and back alleys of conquered planets, new whispers began to spread. Whispers about the humans from a tiny blue dot called Earth. The folks who just wouldn't quit. The people who fought back and actually won. High Arbiter Solana banged the gavel, calling to order what would be one of the most important meetings the galaxy had ever seen. "We are here," she announced, her voice filling the massive chamber, "to discuss the formal petition from the government of Earth. They are asking to be recognized as a sovereign interstellar species and to be given a full seat on this galactic council." The new Valoran ambassador, whose predecessor had been fired in disgrace, leaped to his feet. "This is a joke. These barbarians attacked our home. They wrecked our fleet and took thousands of our lives. They belong in a cage, not in this council." They responded to an unprovoked attack, Ambassador Kethvon shot back, his tone icy calm. They defended themselves against an invasion this very council signed off on. If anyone needs to be punished, it's the Dominion for starting this whole mess. The Dominion argued they were just following galactic law, which let powerful species conquer primitive ones. But the law doesn't say you have to. The Dominion chose to attack Earth. They chose to wipe out millions of people. They started the war. All humanity did was finish it. The debate went on for hours, the same old arguments flying back and forth. But then, something in the room started to shift. Counselor Threshnak of the Hegemony, a brilliant strategist who'd been watching the war closely, stood up. "I have studied the humans' tactics in great detail," he said. "It's like nothing I've ever seen. They learn and adapt faster than any species we have on record. They come up with new ideas under pressure that shouldn't even be possible," he went on. "And they have this stubborn, bone-deep refusal to ever give up." "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" the Valoran ambassador scoffed. "It's a warning," Threshnak replied sharply. "If we keep treating humanity like an enemy, that's exactly what they'll become. They'll improve their tech, they'll build more ships, and sooner or later, they'll be strong enough to take on any one of us." Threshnak paused, letting that sink in. "But if we welcome them as equals, if we offer them a seat at the table, they could become our allies. And personally, I would much rather have humans as friends than as enemies." The chamber fell silent as everyone thought about what he'd said. Finally, High Arbiter Solana spoke up. Weeks later, in the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council, a vote was called. "We will now vote on the human petition," the speaker, Solana, announced, "all in favor of granting Earth full recognition." One by one, the lights on the voting board started to flip. The mighty Hegemony voted yes. A shocking surprise. Then the collective voted yes. That's when the dominoes started to fall. Smaller systems, seeing the giants move, followed. In a truly stunning turn, even a few species loyal to our enemies voted yes, sensing a massive shift in the galaxy's power. When the final count appeared, it was a landslide. We were in. "The motion carries," Solana said, her formal tone barely hiding the new flicker of respect in her eyes. "Earth is hereby granted provisional membership," she declared. "A formal ceremony will be held." 3 weeks later, Dr. Amara Okonkwo, our first ambassador, stood before them. She was a brilliant linguist who had always dreamed of peaceful first contact. What she got was a nightmare of fire and war, but she was determined to build a future from the ashes. She wore a simple black suit, a stark contrast to the ornate aliens around her. Behind her, a hologram of our planet, A beautiful blue and green jewel that had come so close to being shattered turned slowly for all to see. "It's an honor to be here today," she began, her voice strong and clear. "It's an honor to speak for my people. But I won't pretend this is just a happy occasion." She paused, her eyes sweeping across the strange alien faces in the crowd. 6 months ago, a Valoran Dominion fleet attacked my home. They showed up without a word, no warning, no chance for diplomacy. They killed millions of my people. They turned our beautiful cities into fields of broken glass. They did everything they could to wipe us out. She let the silence hang in the air. But we're still here. Not because we were stronger, and definitely not because our weapons were better. We survived because we refused to quit. We survived because every single person on my planet, from our best scientists to our farmers, even our children, found a way to fight. We survived because that is what we do. The room was absolutely still. I'm not here to make threats. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because humanity wants something very simple. We want to be left alone. We want to build our future, raise our kids, and see what the universe has to offer. We don't want to conquer anyone. We don't want to rule. She locked eyes with the Valoran ambassador, and for the first time, he looked away. But let me be perfectly clear. We will never, ever let anyone try to conquer us again. That is the lesson this war burned into our souls. That is the message humanity is now sending to the galaxy. Leave us be, and you will find no better ally in the cosmos. But if you threaten our home, we will become the nightmare that you can't wake up from. Her eyes moved across the council members. I am told this council was created to promote peace and cooperation among the many species of this galaxy. I'm told it was founded on the ideals of justice and fairness. If that is true, then humanity has a place here. We believe in peace. We believe in partnership. We believe that different peoples can coexist without trying to annihilate one another. But we have also learned that peace has to be defended. We believe the strong have no right to bully the weak. We believe that every species, no matter how small or new to the galactic community, has the undeniable right to choose its own destiny. She took a breath, gathering herself for her final point. I'm asking this council to welcome Earth, not just as another member, but as a full partner. I am asking for your help to rebuild what we have lost, and for you to share your wisdom with us. In return, we offer you everything we have, our science, our art, our boundless creativity, and our stubborn refusal to believe that some problems simply can't be solved. Humanity has walked through fire over these last 6 months. We learned we are not alone. We learned the universe is a far more dangerous place than we ever imagined. But the single most important thing we learned is that we are infinitely more resilient than we ever knew. We have learned that we can face any threat and overcome any obstacle, Dr. Okonkwo said, her voice clear and steady. The galaxy may not have been ready for humanity, but ready or not, we have arrived, and we are here to stay. A vast, heavy silence filled the chamber. Then, Counselor Threshnak, a warrior from the powerful hegemony, stood up. He walked across the floor, his massive, armored form towering over her, but she didn't even blink. The hegemony welcomes humanity to the Galactic Council, he rumbled, his voice deep and formal. Then, a little softer, he added, and I personally welcome you. Any species that can fight like yours has earned my deepest respect. Next, Ambassador Keth Varan of the Collective stood. We also welcome you, and we hope this is the start of a long friendship. One after another, representatives rose to offer their greetings. Even the Valoran ambassador, our defeated enemy, was forced to stand, his voice dripping with barely concealed anger as he acknowledged our new place among them. After the ceremony, Dr. Okonkwo went to a massive window overlooking the docking bay. Out in the blackness floated 3 little ships, looking like battered toys next to the majestic vessels of the other races. They were the Defiance, the Vengeance, and a brand new ship we'd christened the Hope. They weren't much by galactic standards, but they were ours. They were a start. Let's be honest. Our fleet was a joke, held together with scrapyard parts and pure stubbornness. The pilots weren't elite soldiers. They were teachers, factory workers, and farmers who had learned to fly starships in weeks, not years. But they were humanity's last stand, a symbol of everything we had clawed back from the edge of extinction in just 6 short months. Captain Maria Santos, looking exhausted but proud, joined her at the window. "So what's the verdict?" she asked. "We're in," Dr. Okonkwo replied softly. "We have a seat at the table." Maria eyed the alien ships outside. "And you think we can trust any of them?" "Not for a second," Okonkwo said. "But they don't trust us either. Trust is something we're all going to have to build piece by piece." "We have to rebuild our shattered world," Okonkwo continued, gazing at our tiny fleet. "We need to build proper ships, raise a new generation of defenders and explorers. We have to become so strong that nobody ever considers us an easy target again." "That sounds like a lifetime of work," Maria said. "It is," Okonkwo agreed with a faint smile. "But we humans are good at playing the long game. We've built civilizations from scratch that have lasted for thousands of years. We can do this." Maria nodded slowly. "I guess you're right. We fought off a full-scale alien invasion with courage and duct tape. Building a galactic superpower should be a piece of cake after that." To her own surprise, a real, genuine laugh escaped Dr. Okonkwo's lips for the first time in months. "Much easier," she grinned. "We might even get some sleep." They stood there for a long time, just watching the stars that had once seemed so far away. In the council chambers behind them, a quiet panic was brewing. A new player was on the galactic chessboard, and all the old rules were being thrown out. Alliances that had lasted for 1,000 years were suddenly being questioned. For the first time in centuries, no one knew what the future held. Humanity had arrived, not as conquerors or victims, but as equals. And at that exact moment, in a small cafe in Paris, on a street that had been rubble just a few months ago, a little girl looked up at the night sky and pointed. "Mommy," she asked, "can I go there someday?" Her mother smiled, a warmth spreading through her as she thought of everything they had saved, and all the incredible new doors that were now open. "Yes, my love," she whispered, pulling her daughter close. "One day you will, and we'll all go with you." The stars above them were no longer just cold, distant lights. They were destinations. They were promises. Humanity was finally ready to meet the neighbors, and the universe was never going to be the same.